brand new presentation. When Doug told me about it, Deb, this is my wife Debbie, and she's my support for everything. And I've drove her through every rock and cranny in this county and all over it. We just got back after being gone for 5 weeks out west doing national parks of the western United States. And so we'll have another presentation coming up on geology of western parks. And of course, as you know, all of those, Zion and Bryce Canyon and Canyonlands and Arches and Rocky Mountain, and all of those will be putting a presentation on what makes those parks spectacular. And it is the ground underneath that makes them really good. So we'll be doing that, but this one I just put together, and Art, this is going to be in your backyard. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Tow River, what it does, where it came from, how it formed, how old it is, what it cuts through, why it cuts through there, and why it is where it is. So it's a neat history. But when we talk about history, we're really going to be going back about 4.5 billion years back. So this is a lot further back than Paleo Indians and stuff like that. So we'll be talking about that a little bit. So Deb, we'll start, and I'd like to keep it informal. Feel free, if you have a question or if you don't understand something, stop and we'll talk about it right then. Go ahead. Here. Okay, first of all, we have to talk about lots of regional stuff, to talk about the mechanism that put the mountains here. And one really big subject that we'll be focusing on is how did a river, and we'll use these geologic models, how did a river come up to something like this and cut through? In other words, most of you may know that the Tow River, along with the New River and the Shenandoah and a couple others, Pigeon River, cut the Appalachians. They cut through the Appalachians. How in the world did that do it? And we'll talk about that. You'll see lots of things about that later. But when you look at our state, we'll talk about geologic provinces. This is the coastal plain. This is the Piedmont. This is the Blue Ridge. This is the Valley Ridge, and this is Cumberland Plateau. All of these have different characteristics, and we're going to focus right here on the Blue Ridge. And when we talk about the Blue Ridge, next slide, it's many folded mountains from plate tectonics. And we'll talk a lot about plate tectonics because plate tectonics is the driver of the mechanism that makes all of the bedrock forms. But again, here's coastal plain. Raleigh's about right in here at the fall line. And so many people call this the fault line. It's not a fault line, it's a fall line. Because that's where the waterfalls are, because you've got sand and sediments and some limestones here, and many of the waterways go to here when early explorers were coming up and discovering areas such as the Savannah River, the French Broad, the Tennessee. They would go up to here, and that's as far as they could go, and then they hit hard rock and waterfalls, so they couldn't generally go any further. This is the Piedmont. This is what it looks like subsurface. This is the Blue Ridge. These are the mountains, and then further west of us are Valley Ridge mountains, and then the Cumberland Plateau, which is a large syncline. So that's the basis of what we're going to talk about. Next slide there. We're going to talk about this area, and some of this area of North Carolina is some of the most complicated, complex geology in the world. Because many, many things came together, many things were squeezed together, many things happened there. But we're going to focus. David, can we focus that projector a little bit? It's just is this focus or is that we're going to talk about this area, that's a little better, right through here, which is where the Tow River starts and forms. And most of you know that the Tow River really starts in the headwaters up near Newland, and it goes all the way to where it meets the Cane River and forms the Novichok. and even we're going to talk a little bit about Northern Kentucky too, but we're going to talk about those areas. Next slide, David. This is what, do most of you know and have heard about plate tectonics? Do you know what drives plate tectonics? Heat. The same thing that drives hurricanes, and that's such a phenomenal source of energy. And it's heat that drives from the core of the earth. And a lot of people don't understand this is a thermonuclear reactor right here. So it's an atomic heat source. It's always heat, and then that heat comes up to the mantle, and then as it comes up to the crust, it makes the crust diverge. Either it comes together or as a confluing plates, or it's a divergent plate. So these plates are coming together. And in some places, the crust down underneath the existing part of the crust, and in some places, it goes up. So this is the middle of the Atlantic Ridge, and this is what happens on the edges. And as this happens, it pushes these things. A lot of the crust gets pushed like this. So Mount Mitchell was formed like this. And in some cases, things form like this. So, and in some cases, they do like this and twist and contort all over. So you'll see evidence of those here. Does everybody understand this concept that the heat's coming up and then it's like a large conveyor belt on the crust that drives these plates apart? So they're always driving. The speed of the travel of a continental plate is the same speed as your fingernail grows. So that's about how fast. So when you cut your fingernails, just think, those plates have moved that far. And it takes a little while. What does it take? Maybe a week before you cut your fingernails? About a week. Just think, 500 million years of cutting your fingernail. How long your fingernail? So that's what drives it. So it's kind of a good way of figuring that out. Next slide, then. This is the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. This is a split in Earth's crust all the way through here, and it drives these plates. This is a North American plate. This is a Eurasian plate. They're separating at the same speed that your fingernail grows. So all of this is pushing this way. At some point it'll stop and it'll come back together. It's done that 3 times. It's done that 3 times. The Atlantic Ocean was a creek here about 215 million years ago. You could have stepped across it. And in fact, there are rocks at Grandfather Mountain that broke loose and were re-cemented when that breaking of the Atlantic Ocean started to form. And that's it. If you go to Grandfather Mountain and hike the Underwood Trail, you'll see a big cliff, and there are boulders of conglomerate in that wall, and that's the pieces of rock that broke when the Atlantic crust split right there at Grandfather Mountain. Neat stuff. Next slide, yeah. These are the plates. Here's the U.S. here. And so this is a North American plate. These are Eurasian plates here, but there are about 8 to 10 major plates around Earth's crust, and this is the way they're moving. And in fact, a lot of you have talked about, well, California's going to fall in the ocean. Not going to fall in the ocean because it's not the right kind of fall. What's going to happen is this part of the very western edge of California is moving this way. So eventually we will give California to the Canadians. Some people say, not too soon. But it's not going to fall in the ocean, it's going to Canada. So that's the way it's moving, but you won't be around to see it. This is a general cross-section of North Carolina and the subsurface of what it looks like. This is the North American Continental Crust, and you can see this if you drive up I-26, you go into Madison County and going up like you're going into Irwin, Johnson City. As you go through those, how many of you have driven that? Beautiful road, beautiful drive. As you drive up there, as you approach Tennessee, those big, large road cuts on both sides, That's the Granville Basin. That's what this is. Those rocks are 1.2 to 1.4 billion years old. Billion years old. So that's continental crust. But then you had many episodes of overthrust and continental collision. So you had a lot of this happening. Here are these bands, and then as Earth's crust is pushing, these things are moving like this, and they're moving like that. And then they'll fall off, and then they'll split. So all of these, as you can see, direction of movement was this way, and these are all fault splays here. So lots of overthrust, lots of things such as this moving up over other rocks like this. And at one point, these things are sticking up, and in some places they're almost vertical. And then if you estimate the thickness of these sections and these formations, and at that angle, how far would they have been thrust up? They would have been thrust up about 30,000 feet. So the Appalachians once were as high as the Himalayas.
Wow.
And that's the way you deduce that that's what happened by seeing that. So what you're seeing of the Appalachians today is a nub of a mighty, mighty mountain range that it used to be. And the mountains are about 300 million years old. It's taken that long for them to wear down. So what you see at Mount Mitchell in the blacks, that's just the bottom of what was a really, really mountainous range. And then you say, where did all that stuff go? Where did that, Mount Mitchell, 6,683, 6,683 feet. Where did that other 20-something thousand feet go? It went to the ocean, and all the sand on the beach and all the sand in the ocean, that's where those sands go to. And if you do, how many of you have been out west to the park, southwest, and seen those sandstone formations? When you see all of those sandstone formations, the sandstones of Mesa Verde, the sands that form the canyon lands, all of that stuff were these big sand deposits. They once were deposited by mountain ranges weathering and being deposited in an inland sea. So that's where they came from. And of course the Grand Canyon, then you had something washed through and washed it all out again. So that's your rock site. But here you see there's the Belvoir Fault. Belvoir Fault is named for Belvoir, North Carolina. And that is a fault that runs from Cartersville, Georgia, all the way up to Maine. And that is the escarpment that we talk about when we go down the Marion, when we're here and we start heading down the mountain, we get to the bottom of the mountain, that's the Belvoir Fault. And it runs all the way up the Appalachians, one of the largest faults, major faults in the world. But it doesn't move. These faults are all inactive, but whenever you get you'll hear about a 1.2 Richter scale fault at Marcy, or one in Marion. That's just still with some pressure here. These little things just slip every once in a while. So it's not a major episode, not major faulting. If you have earthquake insurance on your house here, you're throwing away money. Now watch us have a big fall. Tell me,
It'll be your fault.
It's my fault.
There's a fault.
But there's not a mechanism for a thing that would make that happen. Next slide here. Here's another one, just a little bit different. Of course, here's the Black Mountain, and you can see how all this is folded. And you see these remnant folds like this, and some folds are recumbent. That means they're even folded over on themselves in reverse. This is your top surface of your rock. Look at what happens in an incumbent fold. What is that mass on the bottom? So you have rock layers that are actually overturned, and we get those here. Next slide, Dan. This is the way these things form, and we're going to focus on the major rock unit that the river is composed of, and that's the ash metamorphic suite. And where's Doug? When Doug first talked about these photographs, these great photographs that he has here, he said, Alex, what kind of rock is that? And there's the ash metamorphic suite. It just sits there, it's immobile, isn't it, Doug?
That's not anywhere.
but it's
Lately, for a million years.
and it likely will go somewhere else. But the majority of the rocks in the bottom of the river, that's the ash metamorphic sweep formation, and it's named after Asheville.
Oh.
That's where the ash part comes from. And a metamorphic sweep, that means these are metamorphic rocks, a whole lot of them, a whole bunch of them that were also formed in an ocean bottom. And if you go through the Bowcatcher Cut in Asheville on 240, if you go to the east side of Asheville, and all of you been through the Bowcatcher Cut, that's the ash metamorphic sweep. All those rocks. And when Deb and I ride through there, I'm looking up there. We're riding through there, and I'm going, there's a piece of a fall. And there's nowhere else really to go right there and stop and look. Also, going down the mountain, down to Woodlawn, as you go off from, drop off past the Mineral Museum and go down, those rocks are also part of the ash metamorphic sweep. But this is where the ash Tallulah Falls formed. These were oceans. This is an ocean, and these are the rocks around where we are. And we're going to focus on some of these little rift sections. You find a lot of rifts. And a rift makes a depositional area. It makes an area where rocks and sediment will form. And you'll always hear, if you're watching an animal program on Africa, it's usually the Rift Valley. And you'll hear about the Rift Valley. And what happens in a Rift Valley is that if you don't have compression, you have extension. And when you have extension, if a crust is separating, extending, not compressing, it does this and then this drops down. Does everybody see that? Mm-hmm. That makes the basin. So it's plate tectonic generated. But when that drops down, that's called a normal fault, and that will form a rift basin. And that's what you see, these little extensions here. That's what these are. This was an extension section of plate tectonics, and those drop down. Conversely, if you have compression, this part goes up here, and that's a reverse fault. So these are normal faults when the block drops down. And you had a lot of these. But some of them would start and then they would stop, and that's called a failed rift. And you'll see a little bit in this about a failed rift. But the ash formations form in these rift basins, and then you had a few little plumes of magma come up, so you had some volcanic action too. So what you have in the sediment of this rock, and this is the ash metamorphic sweep, you have sections, and there I've cut away a section where you see these layers. These were layers at the bottom of the ocean, and you had a little volcanic ash coming in, you had sand debris coming in, you had mud coming in, so it's just a bunch of junk. Nothing of any value or consequence, but it made a big heavy rock. And this rock is called, the name of this rock would be an amphibolite, biotite, muscovite, garnetiferous gneiss. That's the name of it. So remember, Richard. This is amphibolite, biotite, muscovite, garnetiferous gneiss. G-N-E-I-S-S.
Yeah, he got it.
And with the Russians.
No, that's all different words. Okay. And I've had people come to me and they'll say, I found a piece of gneiss or a gneiss. I'll say, what's that? They say, well, that's what the book says it is. It's pronounced nice. G-N-E-I-S-S. So I get a lot of those questions, and people bring me pieces of gneiss.
How did the South Mountains play in this?
They were also folded mountains, but they're separated. They're in the Piedmont. So that was a fold, that was a fold in the Piedmont. But they're called, the South Mountains are called the mountains away from the mountains. That's what they're called. And we've had several geology forums at South Mountain Park. But those are kind of neat. But these And then here's Grandfather Mountain. It was also an oceanic sequence. The Coe rocks, as you get over toward Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg and some of the areas of the Smoky Mountains, that's the Coe. And the Shady is right under us. The Shady, these are younger rocks, these are older rocks. They rode up over this. So this is an overthrust, just like this, where these rocks, older rocks, went like this. And if you go to Marion and you see that quarry in the background, or if you go to the top of the mountain at Switzerland End or anywhere along there, look out, you'll see the Marion Quarry. That's used to be the explosive supply quarry or the Woodlawn Quarry. That is the Shady Dolomite. It's much younger, so that's one of the few carbonate rocks in the state of North Carolina. It shouldn't be there. It should be all covered up. And then when you look into Marion, that looks like a hole there, and I gave a talk to the Rotary Club in Marion, and they said, oh, Marion, before I gave the talk, oh, Marion formed from a meteorite hit. And not just no! Where'd you hear that? Some guy told me. There's no evidence of any meteorite hitting the Marion Valley. That's just where an overthrust happened, and then a hole eroded through the top and down to where you can see younger rocks underneath what should have been older rocks, and that's called a geologic window. And that's one of the largest geologic windows in the world, right there. Most people, when you drive off there, don't have a clue what you're driving into. That is very significant. That's called the Grandfather Mountain window, which is a geologic window, one of the largest in the world. So big. But that's kind of what happened into these areas. And see, these are rift basins. We talked about the rift, and that's what formed Tahula Falls and the ash metamorphic sweep. And then you had some of these sections come up and explode into Spruce Pine, and we'll talk about that. Thanks. And this is, I wanted to put this in here. If you go on the web and try to find the route of the Toad River, it's hard to find. But they had the Nolichucky. And of course, you can see where the Nolichucky crosses the Appalachians. And of course, the Nolichucky forms right here with the confluence of the Cane River and the Toad River. But and of course, the Toad River comes around like this. Here's Mitchell County, here's Avery County. So it forms up in here near Neyland, crosses down through here, goes up here, and crosses about right there. So we're talking about this, and then again, how in the world did this little stream come up against a mighty mountain? How high at one time?
30,000.
30,000, 32,000, and cut through. We'll talk about that next slide, Deb. This is a very brief geologic history of what happened in ages. Here we're looking at 2 billion years ago. This is 1.2. Remember when I talked about the Granville basement rock or the Granville orogeny? That's about 1.2 billion years ago. Here's 600 to 700 million. This is 300, 350 million. So at first, and let me just explain. You had a 1.2 billion year continental collisions and igneous intrusions, and that formed basement rocks. Another basement rock besides the Granville basement is the Cranberry Gneiss. We're talking about Cranberry Gneiss. Where do you think, what town was the Cranberry Gneiss named after? Cranberry, North Carolina. Because that's where it was first mined as an iron ore in those magnetite rocks that were near Cranberry. So that's also a basement rock. This underlies Rome Mountain, and how many of you have crossed over Iron Mountain? Where did it get its name from? Cranberry Gneiss, because it's iron bearing. That's an iron bearing sequence. And of course, people say, well, why don't you go mine that iron? Those are little pods. It was mined at one time during the Civil War and pre-Civil War, but they're small little pods, and now you have iron ore complexes in Missouri and Australia that are hundreds of thousands of acres and miles thick. So that's where they're being mined now. So that'll never be of any interest anymore. Then you have failed rifts and rifting coming along in about 600, 700 million years, some volcanism, some sedimentation, and this was the forming of the rocks that made the Blue Ridge. And this was the deposition of the ash metamorphic sweet sediments. So about right here, about 640 million years is the age of the ash metamorphic sweet. Anytime you're in Spruce Pine, if you drive right down here and you look at the little park on the right, do most of you know what used to be there at the park, where the clock is? Doug, you know. What used to be there?
Cold River.
The old gas station.
Yeah.
What happened to the old gas station? Caved in. It slid in. Were any of you, were most of you here when it slid in and was obliterated? I was president of the Mitchell County Chamber of Commerce when they were getting ready to move the Chamber of Commerce in that building. I went over there and looked at it and said, don't move anybody in there, it's gonna fall. Everybody thought I was a nut. A year later it failed. And gladly nobody was in there. But if you look at that rock behind there and the rock that fell on the Tow River service station, that rock is tilted like this. When they built Tow River, and I hope you don't mind me digressing a little bit, but these are parts of the ash metamorphic suite. When they built that service station, they cut a toe out here and built the station here. So this rock is leaning in there like that. It gets water pressure behind it and it grazes these layers. And remember, some of these layers are not consolidated. They're separated. So they're not hooked together. In this rock they are. See all of those layers? In this section, they were not all hooked together, and part of that slid down and the whole bank came off and just took the building out. That will continue to happen on that side of town. But if you... Nothing? Nothing? When the Pittmans came to me and said, what are we going to do about this after that recent slide? I said, well, we can go up there, we can drill some holes behind, and we can do a geophysical study and drill down there and see how many rocks are left loose and about when it may fail. That's going to cost you $100,000 minimum. And then it may say, it's going to fall anyway. So you go up there and spend $150,000, figure out what it's going to do, and then you may find out it's going to fall anyway. So they left. And I don't blame it. But the town is now trying to think of what they're going to do with that. I would urge the town not to build anything there. If they did, it needs to be something like an exhibit where people don't go in it. It can be bad. But that's a little bit about the ash. And when you see that at the red light there, don't read, but look on the right, you'll see some white stringers through that rock, and that is the spruce pine pegmatite that's been injected into that. The ash metamorphic suite is the country rock and the host of the pegmatitic injection of the spruce pine pegmatite that's being mined here. We'll talk about it a little bit. Because it's also the major thing that the river crosses. When you look at this map, Captain, this is not your stuff. This is the river. This is the Mitchell Avery line here. So the river comes down through Newland, crosses through Spruce Pine. Spruce Pine is here. Here's the river. Then it goes on out this way and crosses into Yancey County. But all of these pink blobs here, that's the Spruce Pine pegmatite. So when it's my job, when I was chief geologist of Felspar Corporation, it was my job. So you find where these are, and this is where the mineable rock is. So we would go and look at these areas and test and drill and all of that. And that's where the mines that are being mined now came from. But the river significantly crosses through these. All of this other blue and some of the brown is the ash metamorphic suite. So the river is crossing mainly through the Tectonics and through the ash metamorphic sweep. And then it goes up, let me find another map.
This one?
No, this one. Then it goes up, and it goes through these areas, and it crosses a couple of more things up through here, but most of this is still remnants of ash metamorphic sweep. And some of these little things are pieces of mantle that have been shot through the surface.
Pieces of what?
Can y'all see?
No, I didn't.
These little blocks here are eclogites. And eclogite is very rare because it's a piece of mantle that has come to the surface. And they usually come up to the surface in explosive mechanisms. And we're looking at some of these as maybe a source of diamonds. And we're doing those tests right now, so it's kind of neat. So those rocks don't normally form on the crust at all. They come up from other areas. And here's another map, just showing you the areas where the river crosses through. Can everybody see that one? Again, the river comes up through here. Here's Huntdale, Pigeon Roost, and this is where the Nolichucky forms, right in this area here. But it also crosses some of these, and most of these, this is another fault of Milanite that runs through Bakersfield. And this is called the Bakersfield fault gouge here, so Milanite. So all of this was crushed up, and then it's just a dirt, it's a rock that's been crushed fine, so it's been ground up. So this is what you have in the north end of the county. And then you get up in here, and these rocks that the river doesn't cross, these rocks are 1.8 billion years old. These are the oldest rocks in the southeast and the north end of Mitchell County. Oh, and let me show you this too. See this again, is where the river, this is a cross section here, so the river is crossing here and here, but this is what it's cutting through, these folded rocks. It used to be much higher. Okay, and then this is thrusting and igneous intrusion, and this is where the Appalachians were pushed up. So the age of the Appalachians, after all this basement sediment formed, this sand and mud and volcanic ash, it was compressed due to thickening, and then it hardened, and then it was thrusted up. And again, here your plates are doing this, and so it's rising. And the mountains, the western mountains, the Rockies, and those plateaus, they were all risen like this, and of course, then the Grand Canyon and others cut through. Next slide, please. These are those rocks here when a lot of the rifting started, and this was a failed rift when when Rodinia was separating, which was a continent before the Atlantic Ocean, and that's in the north end of, there's Bakersfield here, all up in here. Next slide, Dan. And then this is a rift sequence. Remember when we talked about this? This is the mechanism where this block drops down, and that's making a bed for sediment deposition for the ash. Next slide. And then this is the ash. This is where the ash is forming all over Mitchell County, some in Avery and some in Yancey County. And of course the river mainly flows through these sections. But this is the Iapetus Ocean. That's the ocean before the Atlantic. So before the Atlantic was here, there was another ocean, Iapetus. The Iapetus closed, and then it reopened in the birth of the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean's getting bigger every day. At some point it'll stop and it'll close. Just like California moving into Canada, you won't be here. But these rift basins are what form the depositional basement for those deposits of ash. And of course that's the same rock going down the mountain, and the same rock you see on the Bowcatcher Cut and Ashland. Next slide. And there's the ash. This is a slide from Mount Mitchell, and you see how this was thrusted this way. And of course these rocks were done like this, and then this part was truncated or cut off. Where did this go? Where did this go?
Kansas.
Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Gulf of Mexico. So all of these are gone. See these layers? These layers used to be at the bottom of a rift basin, and they were sediments. Next slide, Dan. Anybody recognize where that is?
Top of Mount Mitchell.
Top of Mount Mitchell. This is Elisha Mitchell's grave right behind us, and the platform. What was Elisha Mitchell's job? What was he? Most people don't know. Professor of what? No?
He's a geologist.
He was a geologist. He was a geologist.
I knew he was
A lot of people say, oh, he was a scientist. What kind of scientist? He was a geologist. He was the second state geologist of North Carolina. He was the chief geologist of the North Carolina Geological Survey. And the North Carolina Geological Survey was the first state survey in the Union. The first. But these are those tilted rocks. Next slide, then. And of course, when you look at these, see these big folds. So what formed the mountains, you still see remnants of that here in these rocks. And this is ash metamorphic suite. Next slide is. And then you even get miniature folds. How many of you have been up to the platform at Mount Mitchell, the new one? You went right by there. Did you see it? I look at that stuff.
Because
Yeah, see that fold there? So they're folds, they're remnant folds all around if you just look. Next slide, Nick. And then this one, this is actually overturned fold. You see it? What is that?
Right before you go in the Rough Ridge Tunnel.
Wild Acres. This is Wild Acres Tunnel. If you're coming from Mount Mitchell, going back to Little Switzerland, don't wreck. Look to your left, right above that tunnel, and there's that fold right there. Everybody see that one?
Yeah.
And we'll show another, next slide there. See, that's a big piece of the fold. And when we talk about the basin, the rift basin, and these volcanic ash sediments and mud and sand going in there, guess what makes the yellow?
Sulfur.
Sulfur. Where would sulfur come from? Volcanic ash. That's sulfur, and that's some of the sulfur showing. If you drive down to Marion, don't wreck, but if you're going down the mountain, trying to get around that truck before it gets much further down the mountain, look on the left, and some of those rock colors are yellowish tinted. That's the sulfur. And if you really look, they put riprap at the bottom to keep it from eroding. Riprap is from the Marion Quarry, the shady dolomite we talked about. It's a basic rock. It's a limestone rock. This is an acidic rock. When that runoff hits those rocks, it starts to degrade it, and it turns that gray limestone brown. So you'll see where the acid leaks into that riprap. You ever noticed that before?
No.
You don't look at anything. Okay, next slide. This is, and then later, about 380 million years, we're right here in Acadian orogeny, which is when the Appalachians started bubbling up and all this stuff was going on. You had these little bodies form here. Where is that? Avery County, Mitchell County, Yancey County. Art, you live about right there, don't you? Your house is gonna blow up. No, I'm kidding. But these are the plutonic bodies of the spruce pine injection, the spruce pine pegmatite. We'll talk about that a little bit. Again, because the river cuts these. If you go behind the KT plant, if you're on the Bakersville bypass, you go across the big bridge. If you're going toward Bakersville to the right, there are many of these because that's right in this area here. And those are intrusions. In fact, the first mined rock of the Spruce Pine Mining District was Deer Park. So all of that section of Deer Park is underlain by this rock, and there are huge mines back in there, and there's some shafts to 800 feet deep, and some of those shafts are still open. You can fall in. We've had some of those get fenced off, but that's in the river there. Art, have you been down that section of the river? Any of you canoed or been down that section of the river, below Spruce Pine, below the bridge toward Penland? If you canoe that, there are these big white rocks with big swirl holes in them. And of course, that swirl is where the sand gets in there, runs around and digs those cone-shaped depressions. But a lot of that down here. And so therefore, there's a lot of this rock and that rock in the river. And that's the source of Doug's rock in Doug's picture, right, Doug? Where'd Doug go? Oh, okay. Next slide there. This is what happened to form the Spruce Pine pegmatites. And some of you have seen the Spruce Pine mining district that I do. This is a rather new slide. These things come up, again, this is plate tectonics. Here's your hot plutonic source. By the way, there's a difference between plutonic and volcanic. These are plutonic rocks. If something comes to the surface, such as here, that's volcanic. Not volcanic till it comes to the surface. If it's below surface, it's plutonic. But these came up here, and this is what happened in Spruce Pine in the ancestral North Carolinian coast. You had this subduction zone. This crust was coming this way. It was thrust under here, and it's the friction involved here that generates the heat. It's not this. A lot of people think that these pegmatites here come from the center of the earth. They didn't. They're friction generated. So can you imagine the friction? It melts that rock. It's a lot. And this is what happened. Of course, you had these coming together. These are oceanic crust. They're heavier because they're getting mantle rocks. These are terrestrial continents, so they're lighter. So when these meet, the heavier one usually goes underneath and goes down like that. It's that friction right there that builds up the friction around those rocks. And when that slips, that's an earthquake. That's where your earthquakes come from. So earthquakes are generated mainly on plate tectonic boundaries. And that's why they're only in certain parts of the world. This doesn't happen here anymore, so we don't have major earthquakes. That happens in California. And in Chile. And in Mexico. Next slide. But here again, this is the rock, the crust coming down, generate friction here. These rocks melt, come up through the ash metamorphic suite, come up and explode as volcanoes, surface volcanoes. Over 380 million years, which is the date of this emplacement, the volcanoes and all of this is washed away. So all you have are these bottom sections, and that's what's being mined here. And that's what the river is cutting across. Next section, Dan. And again, this is one. The Spruce Pine Alaskanites, 380 million years ago. This is a paleo plaque showing what happened then and then again. This is called subduction zone. This is your volcanic episodes, and these are your pegmatites that are being mined now. But what happened was, of course, that was also, all of this, these were formed 9 to 15 miles below surface, so they were way down. But then as this buckled up, pulled it up to the surface, and then eroded down to where these are being mined right now in Spruce Pine. And they are the highest purity pegmatites in the world. Next slide, Neil. And this is, as plates change and plates move and continents move, this is a paleogeography 380 million years ago. Spruce Pine was here, below the equator, about where Panama will be today. So it has, what's happened, it has rotated counterclockwise and north. So this is where we used to be. And I gave a couple of school programs here, and those kids said, no. There's evidence for this. The rocks in Spruce Pine were formed in an area below the present-day equator. And this is where those continents were at the time. Next slide here. But this is where they are now, the major deposits, and we just showed you on that other map where those are. But again, the river flows through these, and so that's what these things are picking up in the river as it goes. Next slide. And again, there's Spruce Pine, and these are those pink sections that we showed you. So that's what the river is cut through, and these rocks are very, very hard. How did the river cut through? Remember, these mountains started rising in this manner about 350 million years ago. The way the river cut, only way the river cut, is that this happened so slow. The river was cutting before the rise. Does everybody understand that? That's the way you date the river. The river, the existence of the river pre-exists the orogeny, the uplift of the mountains. We know that uplift was 350 million years ago. That river over there is over 350 million years old, and it's been flowing that long. So that's the way you decide what they are. And a lot of people say, I heard that was the oldest river in the world. It's among the oldest rivers in the world right there, because remember, at one time this was 32,000 feet. 32,000 feet. It's been cutting since that time. Since that time. And where did all the stuff of that 32,000 feet go, and how did it go there? River to it. Yes. Yes, sir.
The new river older?
Same age. So they both cut. Any river that cuts the Appalachian, you know, is older than the uplift of the mountain. It had to be. There's no way possible that a river could go up to something like this and cut a hole through it. And when it cuts, when the river cuts, it finds the direction or the path of least resistance. As these things buckle up like this, there are joints that form in the cracks. So if you get, how many of you work with mica clay or clay? You've worked with some, that's what I know. If you get a block of clay, if you get a brick of clay that's semi-dry or semi-moist, and you do this, where are the cracks going to be? Cracks are going to be down through here. It's going to crack like this. In those rocks, when these were buckled up, there were cracks that formed, and those are called joints. The river follows those joint patterns. So if we were rising this, your biggest crack is probably going to be right through here. That's where your river's going to go. And it's going to stay in that bed because that's the point of least, that's the travel of least resistance. And it can cut better in there. And it's all the sand and the debris that it's picking up that it's using as grinding power to cut that. It's not the water that cuts through mountains, it's what the water's carrying. It's just like sandblasting. And it's that sand and that debris in that sediment load that's cutting that rock. And how many have been to the Grand Canyon? Amazing. Same way. The Colorado Plateau lifted as this thing was cut. And it was carrying those big sediment loads and cutting, and look at what it cut. Look at what it cut. And where did all that, it's mind-boggling to see, or to think, where did all that go? And how in the world did it get cut out of there? There's a new exhibit, by the way, if you go to the South Rim and go to the main lodge. What's that lodge? What's the name of that big lodge? The old lodge. It's kind of like Grove Park. You go there, and there's a path now that's over 1.5 miles long, and they've got a geologic timetable in the pavement with little brass discs. And you can start from where the Grand Canyon started all the way to the bottom of the rocks, all the way to the top rocks, and it's about 1.2, 1.5 billion years. And it has those rocks that it is cut through along the path. It's really nice. But when you go up there, these people are just like you. They don't stop and look at those rocks. How many of you looking at Look at those rocks. They don't even read the plaque on them and our friends are walking on and, come on. I thought, wait.
I saw fish fossils.
Yes, there are fish fossils and there are many other, there are brachiopods and other fossils in that, but a neat exhibit. And there's no telling what it cost or what it took to build that exhibit. And nobody looks at it. Next slide, Deb. This is the rock of the Spruce Pine pegmatites, and of course I have to tell you, how many have heard the story of the hammer? I had a little third grader one time, and of course when you're doing rock pictures, you use a lot of the hammers in a lot of the pictures. And a little girl raised her hand and said, is that your favorite hammer? I said, it sure is. How'd you know? She said, it's in all your pictures. That is my favorite hammer. And I've had that for 40 years. 40 years when I first started. It is my favorite hammer.
You do like selfies of your hammer.
Well, wait a minute. Where's your little brochure? Where'd Doug go?
He's gonna be good.
The little paper?
Yeah.
With my picture in it? I'm going to have for this talk. But this rock, because of the feldspar, this is feldspar, the milky gray is the quartz, and then the black is here is muscovite mica. But the name of this rock, and I'm going to ask Richard what it is because he's going to know. Richard, what the textural and geologic name of this rock is?
Fred.
No.
Granulomicrolithic waxy.
I thought we taught Richard better. Leucogranodiuretic metatonalite. Leucogranodiuretic metatonalite. Next slide.
Got
But
it.
the
Next slide.
old timers in Spruce Pine call it feldspar. Easier to say.
That was the name of the rock. So, George, if somebody asks you what kind of what rock is in that river, this is your answer.
Yeah, say it again.
Leucogranodiuretic metatonalite. So this means light colored, similar to granite. It's got a diuretic texture, which means large crystals, slightly metamorphosed, slightly tonalite feldspar rich. So that's what that name says.
Military, it's an LMT. That's what the military calls it, LMT.
But nobody knows what that is. I went to a mission board meeting yesterday, and they've got so many acronyms, I'm the only dummy that has to ask. What's that mean? What's that mean? Now, I guess I'm supposed to know what I don't, so I have to ask. Next slide, man. And this is the Tow River, and that's my son Blake. And I missized this photo because he's holding a trout. And this is the little waterfall right above Penland Post Office. If you cross the bridge at Penland, look upriver, you'll see that waterfall. We were fishing, we put in at Riverside Park, went down and got out to Penland Bridge. If you've not done that, it's a neat section since they took that down now. And this is a section though, watch going over it because we swamped. As you go over, the front of the canoe went into the water and it filled up with water all the way. So we paddled with about that much freeboard on the canoe back to the bank and turned it over and got the stuff out. We caught a trout right there. But any questions, that's really about the Tow River, what it crosses, what it forms, how it crossed, how old it is, and it's just a fascinating story and a fascinating river.
Alex, does orogeny just mean a developmental process?
No, it's mountain building. Orogeny is mountain building. That's mountain building. So it's, it's a story that goes back a long way, that you see the mechanisms that fuel this and fuel the plate tectonics, and plate tectonics has driven everything. And it's been the answer to many, many geologic puzzles. When I was going to school in the early 70s, in the late 60s is when this was just developed. people thought that the crust was expanding and shrinking, which was causing all this. They didn't have a clue if the plates were moving because they were generated by heat and convection. And of course, that is a convection heat that goes up. If you boil a pot of water on your stove in a Pyrex glass pan, you can see the bubbles going up the middle and coming around by the sides. That's the mechanism that's moving conscious. Let's see, do I have anything else to show you?
So this is the reason why we have minerals here that are not found anywhere
Yes,
in the world.
and the reason is there are lots of pegmatitic intrusions. South Dakota, all of those areas around Custer, the Mount Rushmore, those are pegmatites, just like spruce pine, but they weren't as deep. There's geologic evidence that the spruce pine pegmatites were formed 9 to 15 miles deep. When you're that deep, you're so hot and under such pressure, there's very little water. Other pegmatites form with water, and it's water that carries in impurities. There was nothing to carry in impurities here. So that's why the quartz from spruce pine, when it's finally sold, impurities are measured less than 30 parts per billion of impurity. Less than 30 parts per billion, which is very, very, very pure. You don't get that anywhere else in the world. The Norwegians will claim that they have rocks that pure. And I asked them, if your rocks are that pure, why do you take rock from spruce pine, send it to Savannah, and send it to Norway? That's where Quartz Corp processes all of their quartz in Norway. On AltaPass. The quartz that's shipped from AltaPass, all of that rock that's quartz grade, high purity quartz grade, goes to Norway. Every ounce.
So Alex, are you saying these mineral companies are protecting the quality of the Tow River?
Yes. They are doing things. There is acid being dumped into the river, but it's being neutralized. One of their big expenses, when they float quartz, they have to use sulfuric and hydrofluoric acid to do that. There is spent acid after they do that. They mix that with ground limestone, neutralize the pH, and that goes back into the river. So a lot of that effluent that you see, they take the suspended solids out and they neutralize the acid. There's still a little bit of fluoride that goes back into the river, but it meets stringent codes and they have to stay below a level of fluoride. That prevents any other company from coming in here and operating a quartz operation because they cannot, the river will not take any more fluorides. So another plant cannot be built. So the folks that are here kind of have longevity. And they do protect it. Every once in a while, they'll have a little spill. How many of you were here 40 years ago? Anybody here? Art, do you remember when the river was white?
Milk.
Absolutely.
Milk. Yes, it looked like milk. And stayed that way a lot of the time. All of that, and if they do that, if they have a spill and it turns it milky, they're in trouble. But it's cleaned up a lot.
If you drink that, so it was like that, you're drinking that water all the time.
What's in your toothpaste to keep your teeth? And the problem with too much fluoride is almost like chlorine, is disinfectant. So if you get too much, it's going to disinfect the river. You don't want that to happen. But it's controlled, and that's reported and tested hourly. Art?
If I was to go to the Grand Canyon 300 million years ago, would the banks be about the same height as North River?
Yes, because the Grand Canyon was cut in the last 50 million years. If you're there 50 million years ago, you're going to see the Tow River.
You mean, you don't think it was that abs?
Yeah, if you were there 50 million years ago, you would see something very similar to the total. That's the time period of cutting. Any other questions? Yes?
So Little Switzerland is not built near or on an earthquake fault?
No.
Not to come by insurance agent here and have us take out earthquake insurance.
Because he wanted your money.
Well, in 2005, there in national news, there was an earthquake report up here just south, about 30, 40 miles south.
Right, they're always reporting. That's nothing new. They don't do any real damage. You may have a little shake, you may have a rattle, but there's no damage. Now, you did have one in Virginia that caused some damage. It caused some damage to the Washington Monument. That was very unusual. Nobody's house fell down, but I don't have earthquake insurance on mine. What you do need here is if you haven't done a radon test, you need to do a radon test because radon will kill you. And it's in most houses here. How many of you have a radon treatment system in your house? I do. You do now. You do now. It's radon is a gas you can't smell and it gives you cancer, doesn't it, Art? It'll kill you. It's as bad as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And you don't know. But if you live in this area, you need to test your home because these rocks are full of uranium oxide, which causes radon.
Will you test for one of those tests from somewhere? Are those any good? I mean, are those?
Yes, you can get them at Lowe's. You can go to, if they still do it, you can go to the county extension office in Bakersfield and get a test kit free. They're free. And you just hang them in a location that has instructions, you send them off. I think you pay $5 and they'll send you a report back. If you get a report back that says you're exposed to more than 4 microcuries a day, then you need to treat because you're breathing that gas that's killing.
It's pretty easy treatment.
Yeah.
It's not
Do you remember what your rating was?
I think it was 6.
Yeah, C6 is, and people don't know. You could be in a house and live there for 30 years and it's killing you and you don't know. And it's giving you lung cancer.
Just be slow.
But that's the danger here. Well, if there are any other questions, just see me afterward.
That's Jerry.
Thanks for coming.